It's not about your net worth, because up until that point, my net worth looked pretty good, but it was about cash flow. Cash flow is what creates freedom, because when you have more cash flow, more profit, that's when you have more options, and with more options comes more freedom.
If you're an entrepreneur who's built success but feels stuck in the grind, this podcast is for you. On the Live More Show, we give you short, powerful conversations to help you become more tax-savvy, time-rich, and totally free. Here's your host, Melanie Sikma.
Investopedia.com found that about 40% of Americans earning $300,000 or more report that they're still living paycheck to paycheck. Making good money doesn't mean freedom unless you have the right systems in place. So my guest today, Chris Miles, is going to, he's known as the cash flow expert, and he's the unapologetic anti-financial advisor. Chris has helped clients create over $300 million in cash flow and passive income. And today he's here to show you what it actually looks like to stop working for money and start letting money work for you so you can truly live more. That's what this show's all about. So Chris, in our pre-show questionnaire, you mentioned that living more to you means living to the fullest measure of your personal creation. What does that mean in your life right now? You're a husband, you're a dad, you're a business leader. What does that mean for you right now?
Yeah, I really believe that God put us on this planet for a reason, right? That we're here to do something more than just live, pay bills, and die, And so for me, especially when I have multiple roles, I'm a business owner, right? I'm an investor, I'm also a dad of 8 children, I'm also, whatever, you do in the community and things like that. I mean, this, friend, neighbor, whatever it might be. And the biggest thing is just how do we use our gifts and our abilities, our time, our energy, our talents and everything in a way that can bless more lives. I mean, that's even why I call my company Money Ripples, right? Money Ripples being that ripple effect you can create through people's lives as you prosper financially.
I love that. I didn't realize that that's why you called that name. I thought it meant like it's like a snowball effect almost, but I guess it can be to different areas of your life.
Right?
Yeah, I love it. I didn't realize you had 8 kids either. That's pretty wild.
Well, to be fair, only 6 of them are mine are biological. The other 2 are my wife's from a previous marriage. So it's a blended family of 8. You have 8 kids. And,
Hey.
I'd always joke that there was no room for Alice. So we had to fire her,
I love that. Yeah, you guys are like the real life Brady Bunch.
For sure.
That's cool. What was the moment when you realized that the traditional financial industry was broken and that you needed to do things differently?
Yeah, I had drunk the Kool-Aid. I wasn't ever intending to become a financial advisor in the beginning. My actual intention was to become a business consultant. And while I was in college, I figured I shouldn't just come out with an MBA and think I can tell people what to do with their business when I had never had one before. So I decided to drop out of college. And I dropped out, just take a little sabbatical for a year. And I was looking around for a business to start, and then being a financial advisor was one that came up because I figured worst case scenario, I learned about money and about business. But I ended up loving being an entrepreneur so much, I never finished my degree in college. I had one paper to write. It wasn't even a class. It was a paper I had to write to finish college. So I did that for 4 years. And then about 4 years in, my dad reached out to me and he says, well, Chris, when are you going to advise me? Because I understand, I was like the salesman in the suit. All right. I was the guy that told you to set it and forget it and put it away forever. Well, my dad was the one that was like the poster child of this kind of stuff. My dad was like the penny pinching saver, post-depression era mentality. He's the kind of guy that Dave Ramsey says, I want to be like him when I grow up, right? Like that's the kind of guy my dad was. And so I sat down with him and I'm looking at all of his finances for the first time in my life. He's 61 years old. He says, Chris, like this job is literally killing me. I've had heart attacks. I've had strokes, by my 40s and 50s. I want out. I want to stop the stress. And as I looked at everything, I said, Dad, here's the deal. You've been max funding your 401k and getting your match like every good boy should. You've paid off your house. You're 100% debt free. But if you were to try to retire today, you would have to die in about 5 or 6 years because that's when you'll run out of money. He said, wow, thank you, Mr. Sunshine. What do I do? And I said, I don't know. I mean, you can keep working, save more. I mean, that's really all you can do. And he did. He actually ended up working into his 70s until he's finally forced into retirement due to health reasons. And even to this day, 81 years old, just trying to pinch all these pennies he can to keep it going, especially when he has in-home health care and things like that. And that's the thing that shocked me at the time, because I figured if anybody had it figured out, it should be him. But yet he wasn't able to really have a comfortable retirement. And that rocked my faith in the industry. And it was just a month later, I'm talking to a friend of mine who I trained to be a financial advisor, but he left to go do real estate investing. He was doing like fix and flips and things like that. And he asked me, he's like, well, Chris, how many of your clients are financially free where they don't worry about money? I said, well, they all worry about money. Even the retired ones watch CNN and think that the world's going to blow up. Like, well, okay, well, great. How about this, Chris? How many of you guys as financial advisors are financially free, not off the commissions you're earning, but actually doing these investments? And I said, oh, I don't know. There's guys working here since the 1970s. This is the end of 2005. Like 1970s, the guys have been working here for 30 years. They don't seem like they can stop retiring. So I'm guessing none. There's your problem.
Wow. Yep.
And so over the next few months, I started learning about the things they talk about, not just accumulating money, which is what you always teach in the financial advisor world, right? They always tell you to throw your money outside of, it's ironic. You're a business owner. They tell you to throw your money into other businesses, right? That you have no control over. Throw your money there instead of keeping money in your own business, But that's what I was doing. And I started realizing, I'm like, this, either I keep teaching it, but I put blinders on, I just ignore everything I've learned, or I quit. And so I chose the latter. I quit. I said, I'll never teach about money again. I'll be a mortgage broker. I'll do a little bit of stock trading, and I'll teach ballroom dancing on the side. And that's pretty much what I was doing in 2006. But I wanted to learn what these guys knew about real estate investing. I wanted to figure out how to create passive income, and I was able to do it for myself, where later that same year, by that summer, I had enough passive income coming in that I could literally become what I call work optional, where you work because you want to, not because you have to. I had enough money to pay my monthly bills. And that's what shocked me. I was 28 years old. I didn't realize it could be that easy compared to when I was hoping and praying I can be cheap, turn off the heat in the wintertime, turn off the air conditioning in the summertime, and save every little penny I can, throw it in the stock market, hoping I might make enough money by my 40s or 50s. Here I am, 28, I'm able to retire.
That's awesome.
And so then that's where, months later, I was like, I'm getting bored. I don't know what to do. I'm getting antsy. Finally, the opportunity came to come out of retirement and start a business with some partners to teach people how to get out of the rat race, right? Like how to do like Kiyosaki teaches, how to, enrich dad, poor dad, right? And so anyways, I did that. Recession hit. I went broke and, had to dig out of that financial hole. Didn't go bankrupt, but I went over $1 million in debt, had to dig out of that hole and did it again. And finally got financially independent the second time by the end of 2016. So that was just 9 years ago now.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So that kind of goes off on in your bio that you sent us. You said you've retired twice before 40.
Uh-huh.
So I guess that you kind of already expanded a little bit on that. But what tools did you have to acquire to get there? And if there's anything else that you want to touch on that, feel free.
Yeah, I retired twice because I screwed up the first time, right? That's the truth, So yeah, the tools, it's interesting because the first tool that got me there the first time was realizing it wasn't about accumulating money and set it and forget it. That whole mentality, the things that all financial advisors tell you to do. It wasn't about that. It was about how do I create income right now? So the thing that shocked me when I first started to learn about this new world of alternative investing was, I started learning about lending. Right? Because I knew about you could buy a rental. I didn't realize how much money you can make with rentals because I didn't see all the multiple returns you can make. But then, my friends and stuff, they're saying, hey, man, we're flipping properties like crazy. We'll pay you like 2% a month on your money, which by the way is not reasonable, especially in, today. It wasn't reasonable then either, which is why a lot of those guys went broke. But they're saying we'll pay you 2% a month on your money. So if you lend them $100,000, they pay you $2,000 a month. And I'm thinking like, this is incredible because if I had $100,000 in mutual funds, I'm told if I'm in my 60s not to pull off more than 3% a year. Well, that means I'm pulling off $3,000 a year, but now all of a sudden I can make $2,000 a month. And this is what got me really excited because I realized like, wait a minute, all these people I've been meeting with about retirement stuff is like, yeah, keep going, go another 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and then you'll be there, hopefully, as long as the market doesn't tank right before you retire, right? And all of a sudden, I'm like, wait a minute, you could do it right now. And that's why when I was doing mortgages, one of the interesting things is I started doing more affiliate type marketing, as people would call it today, right? I was sending referrals because I had a friend ask me, he's like, well, Chris, do you like doing mortgages? I said, no, I love teaching about them, especially now I'm learning because you could cash out equity from your house, invest it, make massive money to not only pay off your house payment, but then have extra money left over for you too. Right? You can actually literally have your house paying you. by getting that money, the equity out and investing it. And so it's just blowing my mind what was possible. And so, that's why even as a result, like I didn't like doing mortgages, but I love teaching about it, and my friend says, well, go find a nerd in your brokerage that does like you doing paperwork and stuff. And I did send it to him. It's like, hey, can we split it 50-50 if you do all the work for me? He's like, yeah, of course I would. Cause I'm an introvert. I don't want to go find people. I'm like, good. Because I have family and friends that are getting excited about this and they're coming to me. So I literally like wasn't even doing much of a business, but between that and then my real estate investing, everything else, I had like over 4,000 or 5,000 a month coming in. My expenses were 3,500 a month. And the next thing I know, I'm like, holy cow, like I'm working like literally less than a 4-hour work week before Tim Ferriss even wrote the book 4-Hour Work Week. I was living it, doing it and saying, how is it this easy, right? And it wasn't like it was super simple because of course, when the recession hit, now people couldn't pay me as much anymore. Rentals weren't doing great. My real estate values were dropping because, I had properties and stuff too. And I tied up a lot of my house equity. Ironically, even though I was telling people how to pull it out, I was thinking, hey, I still got that Dave Ramsey mindset. I'm going to pay down my house, my personal house, just do that with investment properties. And the next thing I know, I watched all the equity evaporate in just between 2007 and 2008. And the next thing you know, I'm not liquid anymore, which I know, Melanie, you teach a lot, especially with what you guys talk about with accounting, is liquidity is everything, especially when you're a business owner. And especially as I started a new business in 2007, we're putting all our money in that. My lifestyle crept up a little bit because I ended up buying a new house, and that had all the equity in it trapped. And I tell people, one thing you never want to do is lock your money up in prison. This is why you don't want to trap all your money in home equity. This is why you don't want to trap all your money in 401ks and IRAs where you get slapped if you try to access your money. But if you're working, especially those people that work for a company or you have a 401k retirement plan, they won't let you take it out unless you completely shut down the whole thing. And if you have employees saying, no, I want that 401k plan, you feel trapped, you feel stuck, right? And that was my mistake. All my money was locked up in different things, in equity and whatnot, and in my business and everywhere else, that now I was in the hole 15,000, 16,000 every month, between my business and my personal life. And that's when I realized even more so, it's not about your net worth, because up until that point, my net worth looked pretty good, but it was about cash flow, right? Cash flow is what creates freedom, because when you have more cash flow, more profit, that's when you have more options, and with more options comes more freedom. And so I was hurting. I was hurting badly. I had collector calls calling left and right. I turned in my Mercedes. I turned it in. I said, here, take it. I took it back to the dealership. I said, take it because you're going to take it from me anyways. So I handed it over to them, and then they auctioned it off and said, hey, you owe us 30 grand. And I said, well, great. Well, that's awesome. I don't have 30 grand. They're like, well, can you make monthly payments of $1,200 a month? I said, do you realize that's a higher monthly payment than what I just had? If I could have made that payment, I wouldn't have given it to you. Little think, And I remember the guy on the phone was just like, I was just like, I can't pay you. He's like, you know what? You're the reason this country's going to hell in a handbasket. It's your fault. Like it's because of guys like you that this country's in the mess we're in right now. And I had this mad. I was like, you realize how many people I've employed? You realize how hard I've worked and how much money people have made because of the money I've made. So don't give me that crap. I gave jobs to guys like you that's chewing me out now and give me this ultimatum. So goodbye, click,
Kicked you while you were down.
He sure did. Yeah. So anyways, eventually I was able to pull out because I stopped teaching people how to get out of the rat race because that's what I was doing. I pivoted my business, instead started focusing on, how to find money, how to get resourceful. Because people kept telling me, they're like, I'd love to pay you, Chris. I just don't have the money. In the back of my mind, not verbally, because it would be business suicide, but in the back of my mind, I'd be thinking, man, their situation is way better than mine is right now. And so I would tell them, it's like, listen, like if I could help you find the money, would you pay me? They said yes. And so that's where I started to help people find and free up cash, not even investing, just how do we free up money from like, being able to track your money and things like that? How do you, save money in taxes, which I know you teach about, right? What are those tax strategies that help free up money because most business owners overpay at least 5-10 grand a year, even if they have an accountant. And just different creative ways to pay off debt that are more cash flow focused versus interest rate focused, right? And things like that. And the next thing I know, I have this system that's being created and gets in the hands of the right people, and it starts to become viral. And we went from almost bankrupt in 2009 to all of a sudden doing over 5 million in sales in 2010. And that started to help me personally dig out of that hole to where I was able to pay off the debt, pay it down, get under management and control, and then take that extra cash and invest. And this time around, I'm investing in more stable things. I'm investing for cash flow, not for hopeful appreciation, which is what I was doing. I was hoping to make money on the gains of the markets. Now I was like, no, I want to make money from day one. It's all about profit. And that's how I did it.
That's great. So your pain is now all your clients' gain.
That's exactly what I say. That's right. My pain's everybody else's gain.
Yep, that's great. And that's really a lot of it is how you learn is by failing forward and making mistakes, learning from them. As long as you don't repeat them, then it's a win, right?
That's right.
So, in your intro, you said you called yourself the anti-financial advisor.
Mhm.
What is the biggest lie that financial advisors tell high-income entrepreneurs?
I'll tell you, it actually comes back to a story I had when I met with my brother-in-law when I was a financial advisor. He came from a family that was a self-made millionaire. His dad, amazing story, homeless at 16. At the age of 19, he was able to convince Chrysler to start the first dealership in the state of Utah. By 21, this is 1960s, he was a millionaire. So homeless at 16, millionaire at 21. And back then, 1960s, a millionaire meant something. And so this family obviously had a lot of money. They were successful. And so I'm talking with my brother-in-law, and I was like, you know what? If I can get him to invest with me, then I know I'm set for life, right? Because if I can get to him and the rest of the family, I'm good. So I sat down with my brother-in-law. I spent hours preparing the perfect presentation. I pressed my suit, made sure it was dry clean, brought a guy from my office to double team him so then we can get him. And then I sit down with him and do the whole presentation. He says, okay, that's great, Chris. Well, let me ask you this. If I give you 10 grand to play with today, you're saying you can make me, 12% a year? I was like, yeah, I mean, I can't guarantee it, but that's what the stock market's been paying since 2000 BC, right? Which, by the way, it's never averaged 12%, but that's what we were all been led to believe. So he's like, okay, great. Let's just say 12%. So that $10,000 makes me $1,200 in a year. But Chris, I can take that same $10,000, I can invest it in my business and turn around and make a $20,000 profit by putting a down payment on a truck. They were in the automotive business, right? So he's like, I could put $10,000 down on a big rig in my business, turn around and make a $20,000 profit in a few months. So $20,000 versus your $1,200 in a year, maybe. Why should I invest with you? And here's the lie. I said, because you should be diversified. You shouldn't put all your eggs in that one basket. And he said, all right, thanks for your time. We'll see you later. And that was it. Sent me with my tail between my legs back to the office. I asked even the best guys in my office, I said, hey, what would you say to this guy? Guys have worked with high net worth people. He's like, I don't know. That's a good answer. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I would have said the same thing. And the biggest lie is they tell you to invest outside your business, right? Like I mentioned before, put your money in those mutual funds, put those money in companies like Tesla and everything else that you have no control over, that some money manager that gets paid whether you make money or not throws it in there. And then somehow they're supposed to, care about whether they make you money or not. That's BS, right? Your number one investment should first and foremost always be your business, because that's the place you can control. That's where you make the most money. That's how I dug myself out of the hole twice, right? I mean, the first time, obviously, I had money from business, then I was able to invest for passive income. Second time around, same thing. I dug out of that debt hole faster, not by trying to say, ooh, I got an extra $10,000. I hope I make 10% or $1,000 this year. No, it's like, how can I reinvest that in my business and get this thing going? And at the same time, not just reinvest everything in my business, like Profit First talks about. Mike Michalowicz will say, if you're always reinvesting every dollar in your business, you're not profitable, right? That's an expense. So don't do that, but do invest in your business in a way that gets the max ROI possible, and then pull out those profits and then create multiple streams of passive income. I call it get lean, get liquid, get out, right? Is get lean, make sure you are, being lean and mean with your expenses, both at home and in your business. Get liquid means get that money in your power, in your control. Get it out, then get it out. And it could be back in your business too, but it means getting it out to then generate a greater return.
Yeah, that's great. I know one of my friends, Felipe Mejia, said that he basically does real estate. That's his niche.
Mm-hmm.
And he puts it into cash flowing assets. And then that's the money that he uses to live more extravagantly is
Sure.
his, the cash flow. Do you agree with that?
To a degree, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole point, right? Is use that money to help you enjoy versus, because you mentioned at the beginning of the show, you have 300, people that make 300,000 a year, 40% of them still feel like they're paycheck to paycheck. Partly because they might not have a good tax strategy, right? Because a lot of money does get eaten in
Yes.
taxes, as you well know. But secondly, like it's just, here's the thing. There's all the lies really in financial advising are about numbers. They lie about the stock market returns because the market's only averaged 8.5% for the last 30 years. And that includes that the last 17 years, 17 as of March of 2026, it'll be 17 years of almost straight up stock market. Other than 2022 blipped and came back up again, the market's gone straight up. So even though those 17 years have been ridiculous amounts of return since 2009, still, what's crazy is that it's only averaged about 8.5%. Not 12 like they claim. So they lie about that. Inflation, the government lies to you about that. They say it's only, 2, 3% their target, right? It's like, come on. We all know it's way more than that in real life. We see it every day in business and our personal life. At the grocery store, we see it. But of course, they manipulate those numbers and have ever since the Carter administration. Every president, left or right of the aisle, has manipulated those numbers. They lie about, even just the whole compounding interest, right? The 4% rule. Hey, it's okay. You build up enough cash and then you can live on 4%. Well, that 4% rule, they've now moved that number because people are living longer and inflation's bigger than since the 1970s. By the way, that 4% rule came from studying 1926 to 1976. So it's 50 years outdated. The guy did write a new book saying, it's actually 5.3% if you invest with me. It's like, you're full of crap, man. That's the thing. Like most of these guys are financial advisors. They're called brokers because they're broker than you and I are, right? Because they're obviously like teaching this kind of stuff and they haven't even created wealth for themselves. So why would the blind be leading the blind, And so this kind of stuff just drives me nuts about that whole thing. That's why I am the anti-financial advisor, because financial advisors don't like me for saying this stuff, because it's true. It's the stuff I all learned. And that's the thing. If you're $300,000 a year and inflation's going up a lot more, you're trying to put all your money in the market because they told you to, because that's what the smart people say, right? Because that's where they make their money. Well, of course, like all that money's out of your possession and you're not making any money now. Like you're just hustling every day. And the biggest mistake I see entrepreneurs make, I think this is probably a question you're going to ask me anyways, that I see happening, is that hustle becomes a lifestyle, not a short time period. You never stop hustling. You never stop working for money. And I see so many business owners get caught in a bigger rat race. And it's deceptive because from the outside, on social media and everything else, your life looks amazing, right? Because you're making good money. You are in the upper 5% of Americans, and so people idolize you and say, man, look at them. They make so much money. But yet you're still trapped because, you're making good money. But if that business were to shut down today, you're just as broke as everybody else, right? Like if you lost that big stream of income, you're broke. This is why every entrepreneur needs multiple streams of passive income outside of the business too. I get it. At the beginning, when you're just starting, when you're young in business, you got to hustle. You got to reinvest just about every dollar back in that business. But as time goes on and it matures and you start to become profitable, that money needs to come back home and you need to start putting that to work for you. So you have to keep hustling and working for your money at your work.
How do you know it's time then to then shift from putting it back into your business to then putting it into other avenues?
I think the biggest shift for me, what I've seen is usually by the time that you start to get the systems in place and working, right? It's not like the young startup part of the business. It's when the business is now starting to really produce, right? When you start to see it produce, you're starting to look at hiring more people again and doing things like that. When you start to see that start to happen, and now you feel like it's like that pedaling a bicycle, right? When you pedal a bicycle in the beginning, it's so hard. It's the flywheel concept, right? It's so hard to get going. But once you get that momentum going, it just gets easier and easier. You're going faster and faster with less effort. So as you start to feel that shift, when all of a sudden it doesn't feel like you're having to work so hard just to bring a paycheck home, that's when you start to say, let's at least start to pay myself a little bit, right? So obviously take that paycheck home. I do recommend profit first, obviously, because we should be taking profit home first and then building the expenses around the business from there. So first, just make sure you can take care of your family's needs. Then as you start to build more and more profit, instead of just always reinvesting it, take some off the top. I mean, again, I always reinvest money in my business too, but I still want to make sure I have extra profit, even above and beyond what my family needs. That's your freedom money. That's that profit bucket that you need to have, that then that money can be used to create income outside of your business.
So maybe instead of letting your lifestyle creep and get more and more expensive, that's the money that you put back into cash flowing assets. And then that passive income can be what you use.
To then lifestyle creep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly it. And you can do, and I've seen people do it two different ways. I mean, it's interesting, like when you look at the statistics, only 25% of business owners are actual savers, as they call it, right? And the other 75% are spenders. And
I believe that.
yeah, I'm sure you see it firsthand,
Yeah.
right? I thought that was high. But as I really studied it out, I was like, oh, it's actually true. But it gets masked, right? Because the reason that if you're more of a spender, and a lot of times that you have to look back inward, because sometimes it comes from your childhood. Sometimes people they witness their parents go broke. They're like, I never want to be in that level of poverty again. And so they're running away from poverty. And then that's why they're spending and doing what they're doing, right? And so I know people in the financial world poo-poo all over spenders and stuff. Actually, they're not, because the reason they go into business is because they know they can control their income a lot better, right? That's why a lot of spenders go into sales, because they know they can have a higher limit of income. There's no cap necessarily. Same thing with business owners. There's no cap on your income versus trying to get a job, doing the typical route that everybody else tells you to do. You're capped on how much you can actually make. Therefore, you are capped on how much you can spend. But here's what's good. Because everybody else tells you to be a saver, right? They tell you to be a hoarder, right? They tell you to spend nothing, live on rice and beans, cut out that latte. They tell you to, do things such as like just, live on no debt at all, like just be penny pinching every little bit of the way, save up everything, be debt free, just like my dad did, right? He was like the ultra saver. I mean, to the point where he would only buy stuff on sale, case lot stuff. We had Mrs. Buttersworth syrup, cases of it in our garage for over 20 years. As a child, I remember he bought a huge box of Cap'n Crunch. I had Cap'n Crunch for an entire year straight for breakfast every morning. I mean, my mouth still has the scars to prove it, Luckily, we switched to Fruity Pebbles to give my mouth a break the next year, but that was a whole year. And then we switched to Cocoa Pebbles the year after that, right? I mean, that kind of stuff just doesn't work either. So don't think if you're someone that is like a spender, you feel like that lifestyle keeps creeping up because for whatever reason you're doing it, right? First, look inward to see, why am I doing that? But then secondly, realize that being a saver is not what you have to do, because they don't get it right either. They're always going to live in scarcity. They'll never have abundance because they can never save enough. They can never pay off debt fast enough. It never works. But in the middle, the actual way you should be going is being a steward of your money. See, stewards realize that you're born with nothing, you die with nothing. Everything in between is stewardship, right? And so as a steward, you realize wait a minute, money is meant to be used. That's what spenders get right. That's what business owners often get right. They are willing to use money. Savers, too scared to do that. They'll hoard it. They'll almost bury it in their backyard or bury it in their savings account or their brokerage accounts, right? They'll bury it there and never touch it. They'll set it and forget it. They'll try to turn a blind eye and then they'll never be free. They'll be like a lot of the clients I get that's like, hey, now I'm worth $3 million and I still have to keep working. And my financial advisor can't tell me when to quit because I want $200,000 a year, but I have to triple my money in the stock market in the next 10 years before I'm 70 to do that, right? It's impossible. That kind of stuff is sucky, right? But if you're a steward of your money, you're saying, no, what's the wisest and best use of my money? Just like we talked about in the beginning, like the fulfilling measure of your creation. What's the measure of your money's creation? How can you fulfill the measure of that? How can you make it work better for you? It could be in your business. It could be outside your business. There's a tipping point that sometimes you should keep reinvesting money in your business and it doesn't create a return anymore, or not as good of a return. You're like your ROAS, right? Your return on ad spend, for example. You might put a certain amount of money in. You're like, man, I'm getting 5x ROAS. This is awesome. And then you throw more money at it. And then all of a sudden it drops to 2x. You're like, well, that didn't work well. Maybe I should back that off and go back to the 5x again, right? And so there's those things. And that's where instead of just trying to throw the money in because you think you'll make it more, it's like, no, just take it back, and use it somewhere else. So that's what a steward does. A steward's trying to figure out what's the best use of this money right now, because money is meant to be used, like the spenders focus on a lot. They are willing to use money. Savers aren't. But be wise with it, which is what the savers are willing to do. They are willing to think about it for a bit. Where spenders it's easy come, easy go. And that's why they're always hustling for the rest of their lives in a rat race, trapped.
Yeah.
But if you can actually be a little bit wise with it and use that to, again, buy more assets that do pay you income, that's when you start to really create massive freedom.
I love that. There's actually a Bible scripture on that where there's three different servants that get their money and they're supposed to duplicate it. And the one that just buried it in the sand and hid it, they actually got chastised because they didn't do something with the money. And
That's right.
so,
Parable of the talents, right?
Yep. So I love that. That's so great.
You know what? And that's another one, good one too, for another myth, because they tell you that debt is always bad, right? But stewardship is a perfect example, because remember, all three of those servants were in debt. So much you get a guy like Dave Ramsey who tries to quote from the Bible and tell you that this is the way it is. This is the biblical way, the Christian way of doing it. Never get debt. Well, that's BS, because Jesus was literally using an example of guys using debt. And the ones that actually got rewarded, like the one that was given 5 sums of money, came back with 5 more because he put it to use, right? The one with 2 sums of money came back with 2 more for 4 total. And those guys got the same exact reward, right? They were wise stewards of the money. And he even said, because you've been wise with what I've given you, the little I've given you, I'll now make you master of everything, right? But the guy that had one was a Dave Ramsey fan. He buried it. He says, I'm going to pay back my debt. I'm not going to lose this money. And he did. He paid back all of his debt. But of course, the master was upset with that, wasn't he? Because he says, that's not the charge I gave you. I gave you to do something with this. You did nothing. You literally just buried it. Give it back to me. So I'm going to give that 1 to the guy that made 10, and you can get out of here, right? And that's the point. So one, just so you know, debt's the same way, even in business. Like I remember my first SBA loan was $25,000, but the payment was $160 a month. Now think about that. Like if I can't create at least $160 a month from $25,000 in my business, I should just go get a job. I shouldn't be a business owner. But us as business owners know, and this is why whether you consciously know it or not, this is why you call BS on all the financial advisors out there, because they're saying, no, don't do that. That's bad. You should do it like me, I'm broke and I never make money unless I make commissions off of you. But they'll tell you that kind of stuff. But if I can take that money, that debt, and use it to create more than my payment and then some, then I'm especially when I'm being wise with it. Not I'm gambling with it. I'm not doing something stupid with it. If I can do that, I am being a wise steward, and that can create a massive amount of wealth. And I'll tell you, most people I've met that are multi-deca millionaires and stuff, sometimes they might down the path might say, oh yeah, you should pay off all your debt. But then ask them, well, what did you do? Right? I don't want to hear what you're doing now. What did you do then? They're like, oh, I tried to be lean and mean, I tried to make sure I was profitable. I reinvested that here and here. Then I had a 8-figure or 9-figure exit, and that helped. And that's why I'm debt free, right? Like it wasn't because they were debt free, they became free. It's because after they became free, then they paid off their debt, right? So it's just backwards how so many people teach you about money. By the way, speaking of Dave Ramsey, did you know that he's arguably worth at least $200 million, even though some people claim he's a billionaire? It's closer to $200 million. Over $50 million is the value of his company. $150 million is in real estate. Almost hardly any of that net worth is in the stock market. But what does he tell you to do? Put it all in the stock market, pay off your debt. It's like, well, actually, if I'm going to do what Dave Ramsey did, wouldn't I just do what he did instead of doing what he says I should do? That's the thing. It's like stop following people that either tell you stuff because they have some agenda, right? Or they do it because they've never done it before. Like follow those people that have been there, done that, and still doing it today.
Yeah. A while back, I was licensed with life insurance, and they were teaching, all the people that were teaching me about IULs, will say I could not get one of them to show me their own statement. And I think that's a great example of, okay, if you don't have a good example of one that works well, then it might not work that well.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, so for the entrepreneur listening, our listener who's making great money, but they still feel trapped, they still feel broke, maybe they're living paycheck to paycheck, what's the first step towards making, shifting towards cash flow rather than feeling trapped? What's that number one thing they can do? Track
your money. This is why every CPA is going to have their nice little, fantasy when you use your QuickBooks, right? And you know how it is. CPAs, when they get happy, they go like this.
What does a CPA use for birth control?
Themselves? I don't know.
Their personality.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly, right? So yeah, but in all seriousness though, I mean, tracking your money, that's what I had to do when I was going broke in 2007 and 8 is I was ignoring because I had so much money coming in. It's kind of like air, right? You never really count the number of breaths you're breathing throughout the day because there's just an abundance of it. But I can guarantee if all of a sudden you're in a tight box, or something like that, if you're claustrophobic, even worse, and then you're running out of air, you count every single breath, don't you? And that's what happened to me when I was running out of money, is that then I started to count my money. Don't wait for that point. Don't get to the point where you're desperate for money. Count it now. And so what I do personally is I'll actually track my money weekly. I'll literally update my QuickBooks every single week, see where the money's going, especially if there's fraud. I mean, there's so many times I've seen in my personal life that we've almost missed on fraud because we weren't watching our money. There was all those little $50 Walmart charges they do, and it just kind of gets buried in your expenses. And, you can charge back on that. There's money leaks everywhere. That's how we've had clients actually find if people were embezzling from them, because they're like, wait a minute, the numbers aren't adding up. Like, where's it going, right? Where's my money? And so tracking your money, even just with QuickBooks, spend a couple minutes a week updating those numbers. And if you don't do it, hire somebody else to do it for you, right? And then send you a report. So at least you're watching it. Don't wait till the month, because the month's already too late. The month's gone, right? Don't wait till the end of the year because it's tax time. Then you spend an entire day locked in your office trying to do all your numbers. So then you can report it to Melanie, right? Like, you don't want to do that. You want to actually make sure you have that always on beat. And by the way, tax time is awesome for me from a company standpoint, because by the time I get to January 1st, all I have to do is update a few expenses and boom, done.
I bet. Yeah.
Saved, it's way easier.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's like keeping your house tidy. If you pick it up daily and pick up just the little messes, then it doesn't turn into a huge mess. So it makes it so much easier.
I had somebody who was just self-employed. She wasn't making a lot of money, but she was a graphic designer, worked as a contractor, and I had her do this, and she did not want to do it because she was a spender, right? She was always hustling, high energy, almost like ADHD kind of entrepreneur, right? I'm sure you don't know any of these people.
No.
So anyways, but I just said, listen, you got to start tracking your money. Start here. And so she finally did. And we were tracking money at home, not just in the business too, right? So we're tracking money at home. And what's crazy is we didn't have to change the lifestyle at all. But between things that they're paying for, even things like they're paying for cable and things like that, versus I'm like, you can stream all this stuff. You don't need cable, and you can save money here. Next thing you know, without hardly missing a beat, they're freeing up $1,800 a month. That's over $20,000 a year.
Wow.
And it didn't have to, again, they didn't have to be cheap or sacrifice the lifestyle. They just had to watch. And that's what I've noticed. And I'm sure you've seen it too. Those that watch their money just naturally find more cash flow. Those that ignore it, don't. It's just like a principle of life, right? I mean, think about it. Anything you ignore will leave you. If you ignore your teeth, they'll leave you, right? You ignore your family, they'll leave you. You ignore your money, it'll leave you too. And so make sure that you're always being watchful of what's going on with your money.
That's great. It's a great client example too. Why is work optional? You talked about work optional, and I love that. I think that's a place where our listener and everybody wants to get to. Why is that more achievable than most people think?
Kind of like what I discovered myself is that it wasn't about accumulating money, right? And waiting for it to finally get to some big magic number up in the upper millions, just like that one guy. It's like, I'm worth 3 million, but now my account has to get up to 7 million before I can finally live on 200,000 a year. It's not. In fact, to use his example, because he had 2.1 million in mutual funds, like 401ks and stuff. Him and his wife both were working hard to do that. And they also had equity in their real estate properties. Well, funny enough, the real estate property had 800,000 of equity, was only creating $300 a month. And I told him, I said, if you were to sell that property today, you could pull that cash out, throw it into a cruddy CD, and make more money you're making now. And I said, on top of that, if that 2.1 million, instead of trying to live on 3%, which would be 63,000 a year, great. He could kind of, let's be honest, no, hardly anybody can live on that unless you live in West Virginia or Mississippi or something like that, right? It's pretty hard to live on, that kind of money, at least be comfortable. And so I said, yeah, that's why you have to wait. You have to triple your money. But instead, what if you could sell that property, even if, let's say after you pay, let's just say we don't even try to tax-free exchange it to another property. We just liquidate it, pay the capital gains. Say you're left with $600,000. That makes you now 10% a year, because the kind of investments I talk about with like whether you're lending your money out or you're doing things like with oil and gas, raw land, whatever it might be, there's so many ways, rentals or whatever, that usually 10% is kind of like the baseline. It's kind of like the minimum of what most of our deals will do. And so if you're making 10% on that 600,000, you're now making 60,000 a year instead of $300 a month on that property. But now you got that 2.1 million. What if you make 10% on that? Now you're making 210,000 a year. I'm like, do you realize that you're hoping by 10 years from now, doing the method you've been doing, you're hoping you'll finally be able to live on 200,000 a year if the market smiles on you just the right way. But do you realize that this year you could have about $270,000 of cash flow, of passive income coming in, when your goal was 200,000 a year? And I was like, I'll be conservative. Let's just say it takes you 1.5 to 2 years. Still, that's pretty impressive. And that's the difference, right? That's where work optional can actually be a lot easier for people than they realize, especially if you have been putting money away or you have money locked up in places where it might be in retirement accounts. Like, do we want to keep it there? Why would I put money in a retirement account if I want to have the option to be work optional, where I have the option to keep working or not? Because most of us still want to keep working. That was my situation. Like, I want to do something that feels like it has purpose and meaning. And so I would keep working. But still, it's nice to know that I don't have to. And so to have enough passive income come in to pay all your bills and then some, that's the goal. And it's just about moving your money and using it in a different way that just financial advisors have never figured out.
Yeah. And then you're free, if you are at that place, then you're free to do what you love rather than what you have to do.
Exactly.
So it's a lot more freeing. That's great. How, to tie off of that, how should a business owner, how do you know like what area to invest in, if they should do real estate, notes, oil and gas, funds, or other income streams? How should a business owner decide that?
Yeah, it's really based on preference. Like, I've never seen, out of hundreds of people we worked with, never have seen one person have the exact same plan, because it really is based on what feels best for you, right? And that's why you can't just throw them into a little program. It's like, here, buy my e-course and then you're going to be rich. Like, that just doesn't work. Like, it's really that one-on-one attention, right? But I'll tell you, like, usually it's something like when you start to explore the opportunities, it starts to really reveal itself. For example, sometimes I get business owners who are like, honestly, I don't even care about the income right now. Let's just grow my money. Okay, well, growing your money, like if you're going to let it grow and not necessarily worry about cash flow, we might be investing in you might be looking at investing in different things than that. You might do oil and gas, for example, where there's a little bit of income, but it takes time to ramp up. Like I have a raw land partnership I put about $500,000 or so into, that's kicking off almost $13,000 a month, right? But that took 4 years to get to that point. So I'm compounding the income inside of it to keep growing it, and then I can pull it out later. So for them, that might be a great option, where someone else is like, I want money today. Maybe lending would be a good option. So it's really case by case. And then we do, look at ways of how do you split up the money. So then you can figure out, like, this is kind of like diversifying in a sense, right? But ways of diversifying in different types of deals. So even if one does fail, you're not going to lose everything.
Okay. That's awesome. Thank you. You help entrepreneurs break free from the grind, we'll call it, or the rat race. So many feel trapped, though. What's one myth about freedom that keeps them stuck? What do you feel like is something that keeps them stuck?
Yeah, I mentioned about reinvesting in your business. That's a big one, like always reinvesting, which means they always have to hustle, and they reinvest everything, which means they have no profit. But if I were to go deeper than that, I've realized over the years, and especially as I've have more and more friends in that very same place that make millions in their business every year, often there's usually some emotional thing that's driving them. It could be like they're trying to prove to their father that, has passed away years ago, but they're trying to prove to them they're still worth something, and they're trying to make their father proud. Like that almost every time it's almost a reason out of scarcity that drives people to be successful. And I kind of look at it this way as like, whatever the reason was in the beginning, who cares? Like, awesome. Congratulations, you were successful. The thing you have to start looking at now is what's going to pull you, right? Steve Jobs talks about that vision will pull you forward. You don't have to like chase after it. It'll pull you there. Really start looking for a vision that's bigger. And I know you talk about that on this Live More show, is what's bigger than that? Like, what's beyond just trying to make a lot of money in your business? Because at some point you're going to say, so what? Like, why am I doing this? Pace Morby, he's famous in the real estate space. He was on my Money Ripples podcast a few years back. And I did my little intro talking about, getting your money working harder for you so you don't have to work so hard for money. And it was interesting because like all of a sudden he like, as I'm starting to try to interview him, he paused and he started asking me questions. He's saying like, Chris, I think I've done it all wrong. He's like, when I first started in my real estate business, my whole goal was 100 doors. I want to have 100 doors that are paying me rent. But then I got there and then there was other guys that had 1,000 doors. Then my next goal was 1,000 doors. And then I got to that, but then there's people that had more. So I did 10,000 doors. He's like, and I realized I'm just hustling and never going anywhere. He's like, I could probably just sell off everything, keep 50 of my best doors, and I'd be set for life. Why am I doing this? And I think that's one thing as an entrepreneur, you have to ask yourself, wait, why am I doing what I'm doing every single day? What's really driving me? Is it a bigger mission? Or is it just something else that's like, I'm running away from something or whatever it might be? Really start to do the work, start to journal, start to really discover like, what is it? And can I find something that's more inspiring to help me live this life now versus just always saying someday I'll get there, but the goalposts keep moving on you.
Yeah, it's almost like that 7 layers of why. You have to dig deep. Why do you want that? Why do you want 100 doors? And then why?
Important?
Yeah, yeah, and it's super helpful for that. What's one belief that entrepreneurs shifting from fear to abundance, what's one belief that they'll need to adopt to be able to get there?
That there's always opportunity, that there's an abundance of opportunities, right? That there's always enough time, there's always enough money. I think that's the biggest thing is that we're always taught that there's just not enough, right? And we got to hustle right now. And I'm not talking about like, it's not that you don't go and be productive today. That's not it. But sometimes we do things out of, like I said, out of fear of failure, fear of loss, things like that. Instead of how do we go forward in faith? How do we move forward in a way that's mission driven, right? Like I do my business because I know that I tell my team all the time, I was like, honestly, it's easier life for me if I didn't have my business. Much easier. I could go and just enjoy and live a quiet life. But I know that there's so many more lives I can bless because there's a lot of people that are living trapped, that are living in scarcity right now, that could be doing more, but they're not because they didn't know there's another path, another option, because they've been told, financial advisors have told them, and that's the path to almost guaranteed failure. So I try to get them that other option. And I literally feel like it's a calling that I'm here to help people do that, to not just get out of the rat race, so to speak, right? That's the first step. But really it's because, I'll go to this and maybe we'll just finish on this topic. So, and then this is what you have to kind of figure out as an entrepreneur is like, what's driving me? What's my why? Like when I was working with the other company before, this is in 2012, I just felt like there was something else coming. I didn't know what, I didn't know when, but I knew it was coming soon. And I was trying to think of a new name for a company. I was actually going to create another company to be another marketing arm for the company I was in. And I was trying to create a name and I was looking up all these things about cash flow, whatever, and it just wasn't working. I was getting frustrated. And it was probably like a week and I'm trying to figure out a good name for this company. And I was out for a run because almost all my great ideas either happen in the shower. I call it the shower of power, right? You know how you get all great inspirations there, or while I'm running. And I was out on a run and I started thinking like, what's the vision? And I was like, what am I really here to do? And my mind went to a couple from South Dakota of all places, right? And I remember that couple, like they were doing great, but he was working his business 5-6 days a week, burning out. Amazing guy, beautiful family. And, but they're just stuck. And so with some of the things we helped them do, we helped them free up $6,000 a month, not even with investing, just with the cash flow side of things, taxes and everything else. And they're like, and then all of a sudden that first month they bought a 4-wheeler for $6,000. Now it was a typical saver, judgy financial advisor, they'd say, oh, that was bad. How dare you blow the money you saved? But his wife said, I know people judge us for this, but you don't understand. That 4-wheeler represents much more than just a toy. It's like, that represents freedom for us because my husband felt he had to keep working. And by the time he got to the weekend, he was already too tired for us. But now he feels like he can take the whole weekend off. He can focus. And my husband now goes on that 4-wheeler every single weekend, spending time with my boys and playing with them. My boys got their father back. And I got my husband back, and like tears are like streaming down as she's saying that, and I realized like, think about what that does because it creates a ripple effect, right? Like in the family, even generationally from the kids teaching them something different than what most parents will never teach their kids. Not to mention, what does that do for the community? Because they stop looking at yourself when you're so hyper-focused on what's going on in your own life. And now you're like free financially. You're like, I can look around me. Who else can I serve? That blesses the community and ultimately blesses the country and across the world. And that's when that title Money Ripples came into play. I think every entrepreneur needs to get to that level of why, right? Like what's really driving me? Because there will be a point that business will challenge you. You realize the money just doesn't do anything for you. Like it just, the little notches on the ring. You're like, so what? Who gives a crap, right? I lost it all before. I realized that when I got detached from money, that money didn't define who I was. I didn't have to have money and things in front of me to show how I'm valuable, to cover up and mask up that I felt invaluable as a person. So I'd throw the stuff out in front for everybody else to see. That didn't work. When it was stripped away, I had to look at where's the real value, and it's in us as humans and how we can really live more and bless more lives.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. It's always humbling when you get to be a part of somebody's life-changing story, right? And that's pretty cool. So thank you for breaking down what it really looks like to stop working for money and to start letting it help you create freedom, abundance, and just margin in our lives. So I appreciate your time, Chris. If you guys, I'm going to speak to the listener for a second. If you want to connect with Chris, make sure to check out the show notes. We're going to have all of his social media links. He has Money Ripples podcast, and so make sure you check out that. It's a great show. And then also, he has a new book called The Work Optional Blueprint on Amazon. So we'll link that in there as well. All right, there it is.
Yeah, there it is.
And if you're listening right now, maybe you're making good money, but you still feel stuck in the grind. Don't stop here. The next episode is continue to help you create even more focus, cash flow, and freedom. And so just let it roll. You don't want to miss it. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd ask that you leave a quick and honest review to help more business owners find the show.